Good morning, and thank you for joining us. This morning we are going to be discussing several topics, including Walmart's ability to leverage its size to help drive costs out of the business and trying to get back to an EDLC. We'll also talk about some smaller formats that Walmart is looking at and some of the areas that they're going into and how they're going to compete with existing smaller formats retailers and the dollar stores. Joining me this morning is VP of for Retail Net Group, Keith Anderson. He is live with us from Boston. Retail Net Group is a research and advisory company for leading retailers and more. We're also joined by Ken Simpson, the international Walmart team leader for Clorox, and by Ross Cully, who is a senior partner at the Harvest Group, which is a full-service go-to-retail for Walmart and Sam's Club suppliers. Good morning, guys. Thanks for joining us. Ken, I want to start with you on the leveraging Walmart's size. I mean, you obviously work a lot with international. International, one of the I guess, least efficient operations for Walmart, doing very well financially, but in terms of overall operations, they pale in comparison to the U.S. What can Walmart do in leveraging their size? And we were talking earlier about the Scan and Go, which they just recently announced, and how that's going to impact customers and suppliers, where customers can come in and pick up items and scan them with their mobile phone and walk out the door. But what are some other things that you see where Walmart can leverage its size, and then how does that impact suppliers?
Well, first of all, domestically, this subject's nothing new. You go back to Sam's 10 rules. Number 9 is to control your expenses better than your competition. So this is nothing new to Walmart. It should be nothing new also to the suppliers. It's something that's in Walmart people's DNA, and it's in their DNA everywhere, not just in the United States, but in every country. So I certainly here they are always looking to reduce costs, to be more efficient, because it all relates back also to the productivity loop. They want to operate for less, they want to buy for less, they want to sell for less, they want to sell more. I saw a couple of Walmart operations vice presidents speak at the Doing Business in Bentonville series earlier this week, and just like so many Walmart people, even at the shareholders meeting, what do? They put the productivity loop right up there on the for everyone to see, because that's their strategy. That's what they're following. So they're always looking to reduce costs and be the most efficient retailer. They mention, like an example that they mentioned that answers your question, is they mentioned that one of the things that they're doing is that they're when somebody comes into the store, in the past they had to find someone, they said, with a clipboard to be able to find out what their assignment is, like what register or what they're supposed to do. Now they have a system where they come in and apparently they log in with their badge and it tells them. And they said, you think about the savings, yes, for that individual, for that store, maybe it's not so much. But when you multiply it across all their stores and all the people checking in and every day across the year, it adds up to millions and millions in savings.
Well, when I was there, I know one of the things I was tasked with at Walmart was to take reports out that automatically printed, and we saved one piece of paper per store per day. That was $30,000 annually. So small stuff, but you're right, it adds up quickly.
On the international side, they take the same approach. It starts with very basic things like them having distribution centers instead of buying direct. Buying direct instead of buying through wholesalers or distributors. And those are all ways that they use to reduce costs. A couple things that I've seen recently, one of them kind of concerning, is that I've seen them asking for more money in regard to a DC allowance or a bigger discount regarding if you go through their DCs. Also, I've heard them asking for more money for merchandisers to stock the products in their stores. And I think the implication for suppliers is that we all need to think in terms of the total system. It's back to the old ECR, efficient consumer response, and thinking about how to reduce costs across the whole system, the supplier and Walmart, because if we just increase the costs and or pass the costs along from one to the other, that's really not good for the whole system. What we need to do are find more efficient ways to do things that reduce the costs along the total system, and then those savings can be passed on to the consumer. It does no good to raise our costs when then we have to raise our costs to them. The consumer's not going to benefit in that situation.
Right, true. Ross, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think Mike Duke's been very clear the last several years what his focuses are, and that's growth, leverage, and returns. And so when you look at innovative programs like Scan and Go or some of the stories that came out this week about temporary labor, I think some of the questions that come to mind is this leverage, or these innovative programs, or this temporary labor, is it going to be reinvested into the productivity loop, or is it truly leveraging costs out of the system? And if it is leveraging costs out of the system, then I think it is relevant to ask the question, if labor is coming out of the store, does that actually break down that productivity loop if it's not reinvested? And I think that's something that suppliers are going to have to look at. There's a lot of talk about growth and growth initiatives here in the U.S., and I think there's some reasons to believe that there will be growth. But my sense is that leverage and returns are becoming more and more important in the U.S. market. And so as that happens, I think there's the potential danger that there's a divergence of priorities between suppliers and Walmart, which really hasn't been part of the history the last 20 years. Those have really been in lockstep until you take into account maybe project impact. But if Walmart's focused on leverage and returns, I know the suppliers I talk to are focused on top line right now. And the thinking is that the U.S. economy will not come back raging in the next 10 years, that it's going to be a share game. And so in that case, you have two different priorities. And the question is, where does that leverage shake out in the store labor? Does that cost make its way onto the supplier P&L? Is it reinvested into the productivity loop? And so it'll be interesting to see. But I think suppliers are really going to have to stay close to this and make sure that execution in store is not something that becomes a competitive advantage for their competition.
Okay, now Keith, I want to come to you on the on leveraging and what Walmart can do. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for Walmart, leverage comes in many forms, and it's so essential because retailing is such a heavily fixed asset business. Between a quarter and a third of a typical big retailer's sales are net fixed assets, and labor is by far their biggest operating expense. But for Walmart specifically, they have access to capital at a lower cost than a lot of competitors, which means they can enter new markets and they can expand in existing markets, often at a lesser investment than some of the domestic players. They certainly are looking at automation in the form of self-checkout and mobile self-checkout. I'll talk about that again in a second. But as I think others have said really well, the scale that Walmart enjoys is one of its greatest assets, in the sense that tiny changes, when projected across the entire chain or even segments of the chain, have profound implications. I do think there needs to be an equal or greater focus on efficiency and really effectiveness, as opposed to cost reduction or cost transfer alone. I think Ken said it well. What Walmart and manufacturers must do is get more from the same investment, or get the same from a lesser investment. And so I think it's fantastic to identify and prioritize some of these efficiency gains, or rather sort of cost saving sources. But to me, on some level, if we do that without a crystal clear focus on the upside, then we're going to miss out on those other two really fundamental pillars of growth and return. So I think that's something Walmart is focused on, but we all need to be thoughtful about. And I thought Ken said it well. it truly does have to be a system-wide initiative in that sense. So from a strategic point of view, I think going as far back into the supply chain as you can comfortably look for those efficiencies, whether it's rethinking packaging, whether it's rethinking the flow of merchandise to Walmart's DCs, whether it's the way that you make your displays or your promotions even easier and more efficient to execute. All of those things are helpful. From a more day-to-day and tactical point of view, I think it's really about being sure that everything you're doing is linked to and consistent with the efficiency and effectiveness mentality. That is how Walmart gets leverage, and with them, I think it's a pathway to success. I think Scan and Go is a really interesting concept, and I think it comes with a couple of challenges both for Walmart and suppliers. One of the challenges, of course, is adoption. I think it's going to take some pretty significant support from a marketing point of view to make sure that not only are shoppers aware of it, but they know how to use it and get comfortable using it. And I suspect that may happen in the near future. I think there's a minor issue with shrink, which may limit the potential rollout in really high shrink areas. But I would also suggest for suppliers the potential that some meaningful percentage of shoppers are going to be navigating a Walmart store with the aid of an app that they're using to scan as they go is really going to have implications for the percentage of the store that gets shopped, for potentially the pathway they take through the store, and absolutely for the attention span they have for merchandising and display. So I think it's going to be essential for all of us as this gets traction and becomes a more integral part of how shoppers shop, that we understand what the new points of influence are. And we're going to have to measure carefully whether there's any impact on both our opportunities for display and on the effectiveness of our display. That's why, sort of going back to my earlier point, I do think the cost savings angle is essential, but at the end of the day, we have to be equally, if not more, focused on the result. And as I'm sure we're going to discuss in a few minutes as we get into some of the competitive dynamics around smaller boxes, part of the challenge for Walmart is that any retailer has, in our opinion, sort of two fundamental pathways to competitive advantage. At one end of the spectrum is to be truly differentiated. And at the differentiated end of the spectrum comes a lot of intentional complexity, really sophisticated capabilities. There tends to be an incredible emphasis on demand generation. So you see bigger marketing budgets, you see more investment in the store experience. And as I think we all would agree, Walmart has historically sat at the other end of the spectrum, focused on low cost. But the reality is that by some measures, given the complexity of Walmart's format portfolio, its assortment, and what it's been required to invest in the form of more sophisticated capabilities, it is challenging in some ways for Walmart to remain the truly low-cost leader given that complexity. And so I think they continue to battle admirably with the challenge of competing with really excellent operators with even lower cost models given their private label assortment or extremely limited labor models, and equally with folks that are sort of competing at the more differentiated end of the spectrum.
As you've talked about payroll and labor, another article out this week, Walmart's moving to more temporary associates. Thoughts on that? I mean, obviously it's going to help them save in the biggest cost that you said, labor, by hiring temporary people. Obviously you don't have health care, you don't have benefits, and you can kind of pick the best. But what are your thoughts about that, and how does that roll into cutting costs other than the obvious?
Well, I think it's a very complicated topic, but I would suggest any shift from full-time or permanent employment to temporary employment is typically about trying to manage through cyclicality in your business and get a little more variability out of what may be a less predictable business. In other words, retail by definition is highly sort of fixed asset and fixed cost. And so during periods of uncertainty or challenge, shifting the dynamic can be useful. I am sure Walmart is closely scrutinizing two important topics related to this, one of which is public perception. I think Walmart has done a tremendous job over the last sort of 6 or 8 years, candidly, clarifying its stance as an employer and its broader role in the U.S. economy. But there's no question that competitors who have alternative views of the role of associates are likely, at least with investors and maybe with shoppers, to position against Walmart in contrast. But closer to the business itself, I think the issue of retention is important because the hidden cost of high turnover is all of the upfront investment in training. And so, to me, while I have no visibility whatsoever into how some of these things impact even your full-time employees, as duties that perhaps historically were distributed among several employees fall to 1 or 1.5 employees, for any business, especially a retail business, it can create complexity that can actually add to added cost. All that said, I don't know many brick-and-mortar retailers that are more effective at managing labor at scale, and I think there's a lot they can do in the form of more efficient labor scheduling, and a lot that they can do in the form of appropriate automation and efficiency gains for really key processes that can help them manage some of the costs without really falling prey to some of those other risks that I mentioned.
Okay, I want to move on to the smaller formats and the dollar stores. Walmart kind of moving forward with some of the smaller format stores, particularly in the Florida area, and I think not just there, but across the country, if not around the world. How are they going to do that, compete well with not only the Publix and the Bi-Lo's and the other smaller formats that are out there, but more importantly, the dollar stores, the Aldi's, the Trader Joe's, Dollar General? How does this change the landscape for those retailers as well as Walmart and the suppliers?
Yeah, I think it's really going to vary by category. As has been discussed to date, when you look at the dollar channel, there's not a lot of food. And so really, I think dollar channel for most suppliers is going to be in the consumables area. And when you look at dollar share in some of those categories, it can be as low as single digit, and it can be as high as over 10%, which is bigger than the club channel in some categories. And so it's going to be incumbent upon suppliers to really study their category. But I think whenever you get into smaller format, you get into reduced assortment. And so for smaller suppliers, it's going to be incumbent upon them to work with the buying teams to talk about a localized assortment strategy to make sure that they're making their case. Because traditionally, as you get into those smaller modulars, the cut down process focuses on the top selling products. And so I think the other thing is that smaller companies typically aren't as sophisticated down the road in terms of channel management. And so it'll be important for them and their sales organizations to understand how to manage different sizes and price points and promotional funds across different channels. And then another thing that suppliers, some are behind the curve in investing in, is just localized resources, teams that are focused against those different channels and become experts at working with them. And so I think those are some of the considerations for those suppliers.
And then Ken, how does Walmart compete with those dollar stores who oftentimes have the same product, but maybe at a smaller size, so they're hitting that smaller price point, particularly in the consumable areas, which is where Clorox mostly plays? How does that, obviously for a supplier, if you're going to be competitive, you're probably going to have to carry multiple SKUs, one for Walmart, one for the dollar channel. But how do you see Walmart competing with those smaller sizes and smaller price points?
Well, in the United States, I already see Walmart doing things to compete with the dollar stores. If you look at their assortment in many categories, they do have smaller sizes and lower price points. They don't seem to emphasize those items as much as you might expect if they're really concerned about the dollar threat. But they do have those items there. I think that they do, though, continue to be very concerned about that challenge. One of the things that I've seen Walmart doing here in the United States, and I really don't know the significance of it, but I see that they've opened up a lot of their express stores in North Carolina. And I would think that the question that they're trying to answer is this threat because of convenience? Are people shopping these stores because they're convenient? Or is it because of price? And in a place like North Carolina, where they put in a lot of stores in a fairly small geography, I think they're going to be able to answer the question about convenience anyway. And I think they're also going to look at how to answer the issue about price. As suppliers, I think we have to work with them to give them ideas about how they can deal with this challenge. And of course, we want to look for ideas that are going to be good for our brands and are going to also help Walmart to effectively respond to the challenge of the dollar stores. If we don't come up with good ideas for them, you think about the implications for a branded supplier, particularly with more premium products. I mean, what are some of the other things they could do? One of the things they could do is to tweak their private label, or come out with a new private label, or adjust their pricing on their private label. And if they think price is the issue, then those kind of actions by them, whatever they might choose, could certainly affect a branded business.
Is Walmart really viewing some of those dollar stores as I mean, obviously they're viewing them as true competition, but I recently met with a buyer who said anytime that she sees a branded product wind up in a dollar store, historically that kind of means the brand is waning in the life cycle stage. And so it's kind of a last-ditch effort to pick up some market share. Do you think that's still the case? Are dollar stores still kind of picking up the products that are on the way out and trying to sell them, or are they being more aggressive? Because I've seen it both ways. I've seen dollar stores actually request some of those branded products that are regional or on the kind of moving up, and they're going out and aggressively pursuing those to get them in to be more competitive. What thoughts on that?
I don't see it like that. I don't see that.
You don't see
I
the
mean,
products waning?
No, I don't see them going into those stores, the dollar stores, because the brand is weakening or the life cycles that it's headed down. I don't see that.
Ross?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the stigma with the dollar channel, really that's an antiquated thought, and I think you see most major brands there. The challenge for the dollar store is assortment, and Walmart obviously is going to win on that every day of the week. And I see Walmart really matching up on price points in a lot of categories to go ahead and offer that solution. I agree with Ken. They're not focused on those items, but they know they got to carry them. Mm-hmm. And so I do think it's a question of convenience. And when you get down to the customer level, what's more convenient? The stock-up trip that Walmart is catering to, also really pushing on food being part of their trip, or the dollar convenience play, which is more of a proximity play. And as you look at the macroeconomic pressure on a lot of customers, to be able to go into a dollar store that's very close multiple times during the month and have a lower cash outlay, that does look like help for a lot of customers in our economy today. And so I do think there's different plays on convenience that both areas are going after.
Okay, we'll wrap that up there. Keith, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think that last point is pretty essential. The truth is Walmart wins on assortment. I think they win on unit pricing fundamentally. A lot of the way that the dollar channel has attracted these mainstream and leading brands is through sort of cheater packs and reverse engineering to hit a price point. So I think Walmart has opportunities to communicate value in ways that sort of transcend maybe what the shelf price is on two SKUs that aren't exactly comparable. But I also do think that shoppers that are shopping against their paycheck cycle and may not have more than a third of a tank of gas at any given moment are sort of open to much more frequent trips. And so the trip orientation of these smaller buildings is the biggest challenge that I think Walmart has to overcome. And that value equation has to really offer a compelling reason for people to stock up and unlock the full potential of the value Walmart offers on a trip that may take a little bit more time and a little bit more gas money.
Okay, thanks. Ken, final?
I agree about the value. Actually, I think that if you did a basket of products in Walmart versus the dollar stores, I think it would be lower in Walmart. So that competitive everyday low price advantage that they have, I mean, maybe they need to make more of that, because I don't have facts about that, but my perception is that. Maybe also to mention that on an international side of the business, maybe there are some things to learn there. For one thing, I see in Mexico, for example, when you walk in their super centers, they have a dollar store sectioned off. It's 14.90 pesos, and they have dollar items within that section of the store. Also in international, they are really moving forward very aggressively with smaller format stores, appealing and kind of like the express stores, I guess you might say, appealing to people that are coming out of poverty or in convenience. They're putting them into markets where these people didn't have a store like that to shop before. But it brings up a number of issues for the suppliers. Issues about, and Walmart, about keeping in stock. It's harder for them to keep those stores in stock. They've relied on the suppliers in the big cities and the big stores, but now they're in areas outside of the big cities. They're smaller stores. The suppliers can't afford to have merchandisers in there all the time. Also, those stores tend to have lower margins. So as those stores become a bigger part of the mix, from the supplier and Walmart's point of view, the supplier's profitability is going down. Retail-ready packaging becomes an issue in those stores, because they are trying to manage the labor and they're trying to improve their in-stock. And the final comment is, in my point of view, I think they'll figure out how to compete even better with the dollar stores. They have people at Walmart that have met this challenge before, and I think they'll get that figured out. I think the more difficult and more challenging is Aldi. I think that is really a tough nut to crack.
Did a good job. Ross?
It's an exciting time to be in retail. It's very complex right now as the market matures and as the economy goes through struggles. It's a multi-front war right now for Walmart, and I see them focused right now on food. I think they think that channel's the weakest. There's the most share to gain there. But at the same time, they're very agile and focused on the digital war that's coming in that front or that's here. And as we've talked about with Dollar, some of that is really a small format real estate business model challenge that they're going to have to meet in days to come. So it should be exciting to watch.
Okay, look forward to that. And we want to thank you all for joining us today, and we want to thank you for taking the time out to watch. And if you have comments or suggestions or would like to be a part of the panel, we invite you to send us an email at the 8th and Walton website, and we look forward to seeing you next Saturday morning.